Welcome back to the Exempt List. Today is a very special podcast. We are diving into the 2024 All Juice team with my friend and coworker, Charles Robinson. Later in the episode, Charles is going to speak with Terez Paylor's fiancee, Ebony Reed, about the legacy of the All Juice team, Terez's impact in her new book called 15 Cents on the Dollar, How Americans Made the Black-White Wealth Gap. We're going to get right into it with the start of the show. Welcome to the Exempt List, part of the Zero Blitz podcast family. I'm your host, Charles McDonald. Today, very special show. We are revealing the 2024 All Juice team. I have Charles Robinson with me, Yahoo Sports senior NFL reporter. And Charles, I'm just going to give you the floor to kind of tell people what this is about. And, we're going to get into the picks in a few minutes.
Well, first and foremost, this is my first Exempt List appearance.
It is.
Yeah. Talk about that. Yeah. Yeah. All this time. I'm like, am I ever going to get asked on that show? Ever?
Oh, yeah.
You ever going to bring me on? Right. When am I cool enough? It takes literally working with Charles for weeks and weeks on this thing. And it takes some like a month-long project basically to get Charles to bring me on his show. And it's only so I can talk about that project.
The project.
Come on, you knew I was going to come after you a little bit on this one.
No, honestly, I didn't even think of that. I was not even thinking about that at all.
I've been thinking about it since the show launched.
Well, you just bully me then. Just say,
I'm like counting every new guest. I'm like, hey, at some point, I'm going to get on that show, I bet. I don't know what it'll take.
Well, I'm going to diverge blame here and blame Nate Tice because we had to burn through his podcast appearances on his contract. So that's his fault, not mine.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, let's talk about the All Juice team. Yeah, it's okay. So this is the 10th annual All Juice team. This is something that was started by Terez Paylor when he was at the Kansas City Star. You know, I think for Terez, it was just always something where it embodied players who, as he put it, just had the juice, like players that you watched and you're like, they love the game, high level of ability, like quintessential football players that you could watch. And I guess for me, in my mind, when I think of like historically All Juice, maybe Hall of Famer, like, Lawrence Taylor, like that dude he was probably the number one All Juice player in history, right? Like Reggie White would have been like an All Juice, superstar. And so basically what happened was when Terez passed, he had filed the sixth annual All Juice team, and we picked it up after his passing, just as a tribute to him. And Charles and I, this is actually our second teaming up on it together. I've previously in 2021, it was myself, Eric Edholm, and Pete Thamel. 2022, it was myself and Eric Edholm, and the last two have been Charles McDonald and myself. And the more I kind of joked with Ebony about this. The more I do these, the more I'm like, why am I like, this is such a, like, it is an undertaking, and I can't believe it takes I can believe it takes two of us to do this. I'm like, how the hell is this dude doing this by himself and launching this team every year?
It's because he was addicted to football.
Yeah.
I think in a way,
yeah.
Even more than the rest of us. Yeah. Because you do a lot of talking to people. I do a lot of film watching, but he was doing both. And it's a long process. It's a really long process. But I remember still, I think we talked about it on last year's podcast too, but like the first time I met Terez was maybe like the 2017 or the 2018 Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. And we were just glued in on lineman one-on-ones and watching lineman one-on-ones and taking notes on, like day 3 guys who weren't ever going to do anything in the NFL and never did anything in the NFL. But for that day and for that week, it was the most important thing on the planet. I got started in this business by doing draft work, by ranking players and giving my opinions on them, and, got kind of expanded into where I'm at now. So, getting to meet Terez back then and having him, I guess kind of give validity to what I was doing. Because like, if you can get to where you're doing with the same passion, then, I feel like anything's possible. So it's really cool all these years later to be able to do this project, in his honor and his name, and support the scholarships at Howard University and Mizzou. So we're on this is the second one that we've worked on together. And It might be the most controversial one. But we did feel the same way last year. And I think it ended up okay because some guys dropped where we had them slotted a little bit higher than they were supposed to go.
I called Charles last night because I'm like, we might have screwed up. When we get done, and once we get the capsules done, we've kind of sorted it all out. I always try to grab a couple of people in the personnel community who I trust their opinions and just sort of say, okay, here's the team, kind of look at it, but also look at the way it's structured. I think part of the hardest thing I deal with, particularly reaching out to evaluators about this team, is once they see it, they flip out about who's on the team because they don't understand how the team is selected. And that's an important thing. If people are just now becoming acquainted with All Juice team through this pod right now, you have to understand that Terez selected an entire team through a draft, through 1 through 7 rounds, and then an undrafted free agent. And so we're putting people on the team that we would select in the 7th round of this draft, which means they're not stars. And so I called CMAC last night and I'm like, okay, I'm getting like major static from a couple of people because of 2 players that we had taken in the 5th and 6th rounds. And basically people are like, you're out of your mind. Like they're not going, these guys are going way higher than that. And so you're kind of like stealing spots to get these guys on the teams. Now, otherwise, conversely, I've had other people who are like, no, on our board. So that's sort of one thing that we're dealing with in the personnel community is that guys we might take in the 6th, other teams, like NFL teams have them they're kind of in their 3rd, where they would fall on the board. And CMAC last night when I was talking to him, tell them what they said about our undrafted free agent. We have a wide receiver who's an undrafted free agent on the team. And
my God. Okay. Yeah. So, we have an undrafted free agent on the team. And so for this team, there's only 3 wide receivers. It's just kind of like if you were building an all-American team, but it's all juice team. So there's 3 wide receivers. And, someone asked me, is like, oh, so you think this UDFA is the 3rd best receiver in the draft? Like, do you think I'm stupid or something?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Some guy who I had never heard of until C-Rob told me about him when we were putting the All Juice team together. I think he's better than Romo Dunes. I think he's better than Malik Neighbors. Like, come on. So I think people need to actually like understand what this is. It's not the 23 best players in the draft.
And he's not saying that I told, by the way, C-Mac's not saying I told him I think he's better than Malik Neighbors or Romo. But the insinuation that we would think that an undrafted free agent wide receiver is the 3rd best receiver in the draft is. So yeah, it's just part of what's interesting about this team. And after it comes out, I always end up talking to people who are upset that they gave me a bunch of names and nobody ended up on the team. And there's like a half dozen people who, when I went through the names that they kind of gave to me and who we talked about, none of them ended up on the team, which I'm like dreading that because, people are always kind of like, well, you just kind of wasted my time and nobody I, put out there ended up on the team. Well, because of the decisions we got to make, some people make it, some people don't. But yeah, it's always the follow-up conversation once the team lands where people are like, I don't understand why this guy's on the team. He's not that good. I'm like, well, yeah, we took him in the 6th round. That's why he's on the team. Like, we had to do the best we could. So with that said, want to get into the team now? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So the way that the team is selected, I guess it's, 23 players. And what we tried to do is kind of by asking around and watching the tape and trying to use our brains, we're trying to project kind of where guys are going to go in the draft. And then you get 3 picks for the first round, or I guess 6 picks for the first round, 2 in the top 10, 2 11 to 20, 2 21 to 32. Then you get, 4 for the second round, top half of the second round, bottom half of the second round. Do the same for the 3rd, and then go on down through for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and then UDFA. So there are going to be some guys that you might not have heard of on this team, but they're all guys that you should at least keep an eye on for their success moving forward. So I think the easiest one is to start off a quarterback. We're going to go offense, defense. Caleb Williams going to be the first pick. He's only had 1 top 30 visit to the Chicago Bears. It's kind of I kind of feel like after or maybe during the combine is when everyone's like, okay, yeah, this is done. he's going to be a Bear, and he's the quarterback for the all-juice team.
All this stuff that we're, whatever problems people have with them right now, they're nitpicking a lot of different things. And an evaluator said to me, like, we've literally been staring at this kid since his true freshman season at Oklahoma. He's like there's nobody you stare at, particularly at the quarterback position, who plays it at a super high level, by the way, as a true freshman. And after 3 years, you just he's like, he almost said sick. He stopped himself, or he said, you just get sick at looking at guys. But that was sort of the insinuation. And so I will say the one thing I really enjoyed, when you're looking for comps for Caleb, and you hear a lot of the Rodgers comps now. And one guy said to me, though, he was like, I think he's sort of a hybrid between Favre and Rodgers. He's like, because he's got a lot of the athletic traits of Rodgers and the arm and these different things. He said, but the one thing that he has with Favre, he doesn't like to let a play die. Like, he will do, and he said that's a good thing, and sometimes a bad thing. He's like, just like with Favre, it was a good thing, but sometimes it was a really, really bad thing because he would do dumb things or try to do wild stuff. And he says, you kind of see that in Caleb's game. That was a comp that I had not heard until we did this team, the hybrid of those two players, that I actually really liked.
Yeah, that's a good comp. And yeah, I see why people go to Mahomes when you watch him play, because like the off schedule stuff, and he does make some crazy throws. Maybe I still kind of like, should we be calling anyone Mahomes? Because he's like,
right, yeah,
he's Mahomes. But Caleb, I think as far as like any quarterback in the draft that has like a real chance to hit superstar level, just based on the traits, and he's going to be going to a good situation too with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. They've got a top 10 pick on offensive line from last year. Last year's all-juice tackle, Darnell Wright. So it's a good situation. I'm excited for him. He's not going to as terrible a situation as last year's all-juice team quarterback, Carolina. This team has kind of done the opposite, where one team traded up for the quarterback, the other team kind of had it fall into their laps, and now Caleb gets to go play on a talented team and hopefully, live out his best version of himself in the NFL, because I think that can be a pretty exciting player. Running back, we're staying with the UFC, and we picked Marshawn Lloyd. I think this is one that I push for because to me, he's just the type of running back that I would fall in love with unapologetically 100 times over. 5'9", 220 pounds, runs a 4.6. Not a whole lot of wiggle, but you can get one cut and up the field, and he's not afraid of contact and try to run you over. I think I would say the biggest reason, I think he was our 4th round selection. It's just a fumbling problem, and if you're going to fumble the ball a lot, that's going to ding you on draft day. It has to. It's like the most sacred thing in football. Don't turn the ball over. So pretty talented player, but some fumble issues might drop his draft stock a little bit. So we feel pretty good, I think, about the 4th round range for Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah, I had an AFC team that is very good at selecting running backs, that has had a good track record selecting running backs, that told me they really like him a lot. And they're going to be looking for a middle round running back. Like, it's clear kind of in that 3rd, 4th range, they're going to be looking for value. And that's the running back they really like. And the GM said to me, yeah, he's got the fumbling issues. He's like, but he thought it was fixable. So I'm like, okay. And I tend to trust teams that have a good track record at positions. So like, generally, if Brian Gutekunst in Green Bay starts to tell you about a wide receiver that you can get in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, he hits on a lot of those. So you tend to listen. And so this particular team, when they pointed out and this was after you had pushed to put him at the running back spot, we kind of had we had to have a discussion over who that position would be. So I felt good about that after we ended up putting him on. So
it's funny. For those who are curious, there's a Marshawn Lloyd cut up on YouTube that against Utah, and the cut up of all his runs is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And he makes some incredible runs in this 2 minutes and 30 seconds, but he also fumbles the ball twice. So, that's kind of the Marshawn Lloyd story.
Yeah, that's a great cut up.
You get everything you need from that small little glimpse into his game. Yeah, so that cut up on Marshawn Lloyd tells you everything you need to know. We'll move on to the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL draft, according to Yahoo Sports, Charles Robinson and Charles McDonald. Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison, Georgia wide receiver Lad McConkey, and Holy Cross wide receiver Jalen Coker. Marvin is obviously top 10 pick. He's so good that he has basically opted out of the draft process, and no one seems to think it's going to hurt him that much on draft day, or if at all. Lad McConkey was our top of the top of the second round range. Then Jalen Coker, who we alluded to earlier in the show, is our UDFA pick for the All Juice team, and he plays wide receiver for Holy Cross. Just to be clear, do not think Jalen Coker is the third best wide receiver in the draft, even though he does have some draft prospects coming up here, and could find himself as a priority UDFA after the draft. How much time do we need to spend on Marvin Harrison?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Hall of Fame. Like when you have to present Joe Montana for the Hall of Fame, you just stand up and you go, Joe Montana, and then you sit down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can say it with Marvin Harrison. Okay, we're done. Let's move on to the next. He's everything. So
he's everything. Yeah. The only thing with Marvin to me that's so impressive is you go from CJ Stroud, you put up like 1,400 yards or 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns, and then you get Kyle McCord, who got forced out to Syracuse, and you have the same exact season that you had with maybe the best rookie quarterback we've ever seen. That's kind of all you need to know. Georgia wide receiver Lad McConkey. I'm very happy that we're here because selfishly I get to pat myself on the back because ever since Lad was a walk-on wide receiver for my favorite team, the mighty Georgia Bulldogs, I've been saying this guy's an NFL player, and he was even under the radar as far as Georgia's recruiting for him goes. So for him to be here at this point is pretty cool. He's kind of on the smaller side, I think about 186 pounds, but he hit 4.3 in the 40-yard dash. He's jumping out the gym. He balled out in the agility drills. And it seems like people are really a fan of his tape and think he has a chance to kind of outplay his size limitations in the NFL.
There's a lot of guys that I talk to who are sitting there going, like, they clearly want him to fall into the middle of the second round. And I'm like, this many people can't want him to fall into that range for him not to go a lot higher. Yeah, it's exactly right. I thought this guy's going to go higher because somebody in that group's going to go, yeah, well, he's just not going to get to us. Like, we're going to have to figure out whether it's trading up, at the end of the first round or whatever. Well liked by a lot of people. What I thought was interesting when I was talking to evaluators, like you definitely had one guy who kind of went off about people who were just comping him to slots. And he was like, he's not a slot in Georgia's offense. Why the hell are people just immediately taking, fill in the white guy slot player who is good in the NFL and then like stick him on the Lad McConkey comp? He's like, no, he can be an outside player. He can be an inside player. He's got a lot of versatility. He talked about another evaluator talked about how good McConkey was at just setting up corners, like just how he goes about his business. Like he just knows exactly what he wants to do. There's a lot of precision in what he does. And then another guy said, like, hey, if Bowers didn't exist in that offense, he's like, this guy would have put up big numbers. He said, it's just Bowers was eating constantly. And what ended up happening with Lad, it was like, all right, we're going to give Bowers 30, 40 touches that are like these simplified touches, like, and then McConkey, you go down and do all the other, like, kind of the dirty work downfield. You have to do like the more complicated stuff. And so it's a lot of love for this guy, despite when you look at his statistics, if you're not familiar with his game, you just look at the box score and you look at statistics, you're like, whoa, it's not 1,000-yard receiver. Like you're expecting to see 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns and you don't.
Yeah, you just kind of gotta watch him, man. Like he is when he gets the ball in his hands, he's so special, and he does do a lot of outside wide receiver things that would suggest you should be drafted in the second, top of the second, or shoot, maybe even late first if someone gets a little bit scared and says that's our guy. I think the only concern I have with him is just because I've watched him play every game. Maybe some injury stuff that's popped up last year and the year before, but still, he's so dynamic. And to me, Lad's the kind of guy that makes a good wide receiver group like a great group. Maybe he's not, your classic number one, but if you can get him to like a number two role, I think that's pretty good for an offense long term. And then Jalen Coker, I'll let you have the floor on this one.
Yeah, I'll take Coker. He was the one that I had when I specifically asked guys to bring UDFAs to the table. He came up with, I think it was 4 or 5 evaluators mentioned him by the end of the process. He is 6'1", 208. Okay, like when you talk to scouts about him, they look at him and they're like, they see an NFL like receiver. or like he looks like an NFL receiver. And then he ran a 4.57 40 has a 42-inch vert. So there's some explosive elements there that you see in the testing. I think the biggest thing with him is, and he put up pretty good numbers at Holy Cross. I think he had an opportunity to enter the portal prior to his last season there, and he didn't take it because he had put up a pretty good season. He could have probably gone to like, say, a mid-major or, a little higher level of competition, but instead he stayed at Holy Cross, put up a pretty big season his last year there. He was a combine invitee, but a player that just he clearly has the tools, he has the abilities, he has the size. It's the competition. I think when evaluators turn on film, they're like, look at the competition he's playing. Like, there's literally not playing. He's very rarely ever playing against any NFL caliber defenses, schemes, individual matchups, things like that. So that's a little bit of the worry. But I think there's a definitive thought. He could come in and be a core special teamer for us, and we can see if we can develop out his game and how he matches up competitively with other players and maybe can crack our top 3 wide receivers at some point down the line. That's what I think when we put on a UDFA on the team, that's what we're doing, right? We're trying to grab somebody. Let's make the team. They've got traits or they have, whether it's physical or athletic traits. Let's see if they can blossom into something else.
Yep. So that's going to do for the wide receiver room. Our tight end. There was really only one choice this year. It had to be Brock Bowers from Georgia, who we mentioned before when we were talking about Lapp Conkey. Bowers is insane. Like, he doesn't maybe like physically fit into like a classic tight end mold. He's like 6'3", 240. But even in the SEC, he was one of the fastest players on the field, one of the fastest players with the ball in his hand. Georgia would use him to the point where they were using him on like jet sweeps and handing him the ball off, and he would go run 75, 80 yards for a touchdown as 240 pound tight end. They play him in the slot. They play him out wide. He's just kind of a different beast. I kind of get a little worried because I feel like some team might just draft it and say, you're listed at tight end, go play on the line, where he's not like he could be useful there, but that's not the full Brock Bowers experience. So, I think one of the things that I come back to with Brock and his projection to the NFL is just like, look how many times Georgia tried to give him the ball. When he was healthy, they were trying to find a way to give him the ball almost every other play. And that says a lot to how they viewed his talent on a roster filled with 5 stars. So, I don't know. The only reason I would see him really failing in the NFL is if he's still hurt from last season after the ankle surgery that he had. But if not, I think he's gonna be an absolute monster.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say about Bowers. Like, to me, he's kind of in that Marvin Harrison class where we're like, of course, like you see it, like there's no question. And I think the only thing that stuck out when I would talk to people about Bowers, and it wasn't even for the All Juice team, just in general, I feel like I've been talking about him for a while with guys. It's that he has TE next to his name, where it's like, you just can't look at him like he's a tight end. You have to look at him like he's just a mismatch. Figure out how to mismatch him, period. Like, his position is offensive mismatch, whether that's running the ball, whether it's throwing short stuff, whether it's trying to get him matched up with a slot corner or a linebacker that can't turn and run, that kind of a thing. That's it. But you bring up the injury point is a really good. It's a fair question now, I think, after that last season. But to me, Bowers, there's no question. He was the tight end from the start.
And even after he got hurt, he still came back faster from that tightrope surgery than most people would and finished out the season and played in the SEC title game and even considered playing in that Orange Bowl game very briefly. I don't know how seriously, but briefly for a minute when they played Florida State with all the opt-outs. So the competitiveness is there. Toughness is there. It's just got to see where he's at when camp starts and when OTA start after the draft. The third Georgia player, offensive tackle. Yeah, we're moving on to offensive tackles. We have a third Georgia player, Amarius Mims. And the best way that I like to, talk about Amarius Mims is, when our friend and colleague Nate Tice was, he's going on and looking at the draft prospects, starting to scout guys for all the big boards and mock drafts we've been doing. He put something in one of the group chats I'm in with him. He was like, does Georgia have like Jonathan Ogden on offensive line. I was like, I don't know. He may be because Amarius Mims. I think the talent's out of this world. Maybe just solely based on talent, you could make a case he's the best guy in his class, but only played 7 games last year. The year before that was, kind of a part-time offensive tackle. Over the past 2 year combined, I looked it up, he's only played 682 snaps, which is not like basically a full season in 21 games, which is not a whole lot of football. So there's projection there, but the baseline talent's out of this world.
Yeah, you did more work on him than I did. But huge human who's clearly an athlete, and like you said, I mean, it's the snap count, but it leaves a lot on the table. Like, is he, as you said, I don't think he'll end up being the first tackle off the board. He might not be the second tackle off the board, but he's going to end up, I would think, landing somewhere in that first round, and maybe he develops into that guy down the line where we look back and go, oh yeah, okay, he really turned out to be the monster, the one everybody should have been shooting for and projecting it out. So
I'm excited to see where he ends up because, I think he's one of those guys where I wouldn't be surprised if he went like 12 or 30 just based on how teams feel about him. Our other offensive tackle selection is Patrick Paul from Houston. I don't have as much on him as I do Amarius Mims, but it's weird because I feel like Houston, they put out like someone of this status every once in a while. It's just kind of like a smooth pass blocker that's got some frame to him that you could add some weight and still projects to be like a pretty talented guy in the NFL.
Yeah, he's a pass blocker. I mean, there's no question he's a high-end pass blocker right now. And it's the years that he has been there, he's seen some different quarterbacks kind of come through the system, and he's been very adept. I mean, he's got 86-inch plus wingspan. It's insane. The guy's 330 plus, nearly 6'8". He's just huge. He's a big ass dude. And the run blocking, when I live here in Houston, Dawn's a U of H alum, so we watch all the Houston games. So I tend to, anybody who comes out of the program, I'm usually pretty aware of who they are, especially if they've spent time. He needs work in the run blocking. Like he's, but if you can walk in and go, hey, pass blocking guy immediately, like in this league, it's a passing league now. So if that is where the player is super advanced and you get a player of this size, this wingspan, checks off all those boxes, you can work on the run, right? Like you figure it out. I'm happy with him though as a right tackle for us.
Moving on to the interior at offensive guard, we have UConn's Christian Haynes, Michigan's Zach Zinter. Christian Haynes is someone that I've really, really enjoyed watching over the past, couple weeks and couple months as what's a really talented offensive line class starts to enter the NFL. Haynes is someone to me, I think we have him in the 3rd round. If I was drafting, I would maybe consider even taking him like top of the 2nd or late 1st, just because I think his skills are really that strong in terms of just being like projecting out as like a zone blocking offensive guard. He's really good at reaching some of these more athletic defensive linemen, which is a skill that not everyone has. I think he's one of those guys. To me, Christian Haynes, of all the guys we had saying like that round 2 or round 3 range for this list, to me, that's the guy we look back at in a couple years and be like, what the hell? How did he end up, not being a 1st round pick after everything we know about him?
Yeah, you did more work on Haynes than I did, but he was someone that was brought to my attention multiple times. One thing I would just add, I think you said it all, but one thing that I would add is a few evaluators said, hey, he might have some versatility to play center too. Like he worked on snapping the football and seeing if he could add center to his repertoire as well, from how the NFL would like him to do it. So there's also some versatility there.
At center, we had Zach Frazier from West Virginia. I don't think there's too much to say about him. Just pretty clean center prospect. Maybe not the highest ceiling. I don't know if he'll ever be Alex Mack or Travis Frederick in that tier, but if you need to plug in someone that can start for you pretty early on as a rookie, I think he fits the bill on that.
Yeah. The only thing, this is where my not having my notes in front of me right now is killing me, because I remember someone in particular bringing him up and saying, go to this game. He suffers an injury on a drive, does not want them to burn a timeout. So the dude literally crawls off the field. like, because he does not want to screw up the drive. And I think they ended up scoring on that drive. And he was just like, it blew, like, this particular evaluator is like, just like blew my mind, like, to see the toughness of a guy and it was a pretty painful injury that he suffered, but was like, I'm just getting the hell off the field to continue this drive. I thought that was a pretty interesting little anecdote. Yeah, when it comes down to Zinter, I think I think a lot of evaluators liked him. Obviously, in Michigan, a number of Michigan offensive lines that were very high tier. Suffers obviously a season-ending injury he breaks his leg against Ohio State. I think a lot of evaluators thought he would do really well in the process. He shows a lot of toughness. A lot of the linemen that have come out of Michigan over decades that have made it. He has some of those traits, the program traits. And I think some guys thought he might even be able to work his way into late first round, early second round kind of territory now because of the broken leg. Didn't take part in anything in the draft process. Should be ready to go for training camp. But I think he's just that sort of quintessential mid-round Michigan offensive lineman, offensive guard who teams look at and think you can bring him in. And maybe that'll be like a 10-year guard for you. Just a really good player. Maybe not an all-pro level player, but a good player for you that you plug and play for a decade.
Yes, that's going to do it for the All Juice team offense. Just a quick recap. Quarterback, Caleb Williams. Running back, Marshawn Lloyd, both at USC. Wide receiver, Ohio State's Marvin Harrison Jr., Georgia's Ladd McConkey, Holy Cross's Jalen Coker. Tight end, Georgia's Brock Bauer. Offensive tackle, also another Georgia player. Offensive tackle, Amarius Mims, and Houston offensive tackle, Patrick Paul. Interior, we have guard, Christian Hayne from UConn, Michigan guard, Zach Zinter, and West Virginia center, Zach Frazier. And it's time for the All Juice team defense. This one was we burned a few later picks here, and I think that mostly reflects just the talent pool and what positions are strong this year. So like we used some late picks on linebacker and safety, and another one at cornerback. We'll see how right the projections are there, though. But the only top picks that we really used on defense, especially on the defensive line, we're going to start off with Penn State edge Chop Robinson. I like Chop. I think he's someone that when I've talked to some of my scouting buddies and some of my friends who like to watch tape, like the opinions are a little bit split on him. But in a class that might not have, a Myles Garrett, a Will Anderson type that is just no brainer, you kind of have to stretch the imagination a little bit. So why not take a chance on a 21-year-old who runs a 4.4 and has some production rushing the passer? I think that's a lot of the appeal with Chop Robinson right now.
I think there's a little Amarius Mims here when you talk about projection. Like he's another projection guy where it's like he's the evaluators I talked to really loved. He's super young, just turned 21. And then once he transferred to Penn State from Maryland and got a shot to start to contribute, immediately you kind of saw the arrow where it was going. It was like, wow, he's raw, but there's a lot to work with this guy. And athletically, we saw what we saw at the combine. Like it was everything is there for him to be a great player. And one evaluator said to me, if he had just gone back, and this evaluator kind of wished he had, he was like, if he had just gone back one more year, he's going to be like a top 5 pick next year. Like I really think given a full season, put it all together, where he's going, where he's projecting to in the college game, 2024 would have been his super dominant college season. Instead, you're going to have NFL teams that are going to put a little projection into it. But I mean, size, speed, the production was there. He popped on the Penn State tape. It was funny because when we were trying to find linebackers and I was talking to someone about Curtis Jacobs, he was like, you like kind of try to watch these other guys. And he's like, but you keep looking at Chop. You're like, you're watching. He's like, when you're watching the all 22, as much as you're trying to focus it on one person, I kept getting distracted by things Chop Robinson was doing. He's like, that's usually a pretty good sign, for a player when you're really trying not to watch that player, but you end up being drawn to him anyway.
He's fun. I think his learning curve might be a little bit high, but that's not a bad gamble to take in this draft class. The other edge was Clemson's Xavier Thomas. This was a 7th round pick. And really at that point, I just kind of decided if we're going to still need to take an edge, we should go with someone who was viewed as a potential top pick at one point in their career. And they're like, if you go back to, and it's dating yourself at this point. If you go back to like 2020 Clemson tape, Xavier Thomas really looks like a future first round pick at defensive end. And then he got COVID. To the point where, if you remember what Dabo Swinney was like during the COVID season, I don't know, depending on what your COVID stances are, he was not the most afraid of COVID, is how I'll put it. Even he was like, when Xavier got sick, was like, hey, this might take a while for him to recover from. And he never really got back to what he was before, but he has turned into a pretty useful player. And in the 7th round, hey, a guy who was viewed as a potential first round pick at one point, what's the harm?
I'm just trying to get over the fact that going back to 2020 now dates you.
I'm talking about in terms of like projecting someone to the NFL.
Okay.
That was 4 years ago.
Yeah, I'm like, really? I'm like, are you that young that going back to 20? I'm going to date myself here and go back to 2020.
No, I'm just saying, hey, for the 2024 NFL draft, you should look back to the 2020 season for this all juice player.
No, I did not know that. I really was not that familiar with Thomas going back that far. And then when you brought it up, and then I started to kind of read, I didn't talk to a lot of evaluators on this. Was a guy that you really wanted to put on the team. But when I went and I read how his game did feel like it changed after the COVID diagnosis, and the question of like, is there some long COVID factors in play here, and does he ever kind of get past that? It's intriguing. It's definitely intriguing. And
yeah, he got really sick, like very, very sick.
Yeah, he very, very sick. And I'll be curious, though, if he goes higher than the 7th that we think he may land in. Like, I'll be curious if maybe someone a little higher up, and you know how it is in the 5th. You're like, you got to pick to burn here. Like the athletic profile, clearly saw a glimpse at one point. Maybe we throw it at it and see what happens.
Yeah. Joining them on the defensive line will be defensive tackles Johnny Newton from Illinois, Brandon Dorlus from Oregon. Newton, I see like Grady Jarrett 2.0 when I watch him play. Short, squattier player that, I feel like with the height stuff, the defensive tackle, the NFL can be a little, inconsistent in how they feel sometimes, just where those guys go in the draft. So I look at someone who I would probably take in the 1st round, but could end up being a steal and just really disruptive, strong player that kind of gets up in the field in a hurry. And I think that his, the floor he has as a player in terms of his technique will allow him to produce pretty early.
I'll stand on your assessment. I know you had these two in particular you were very, very versed on. So.
Yes. And Dorlus, he's kind of a tweener guy. And the thing that I always tell people about like tweener defensive tackles is like, it can work where you're kind of an inside-outside guy, but the most important thing is you're not getting like your butt kicked every play and getting driven down the field. Like I remember going back when Solomon Thomas was coming out of Stanford and people were so excited about him. Like, yeah, like this is cool. And he makes a lot of plays upfield, but there's so many plays where he's in the laps of his linebackers. And those are plays that you can't use. I don't think that Brandon Dorlus really has that problem. I think he's a lot more stout at the point of attack, and it should give him a chance to be a pretty productive player early on. Linebacker,
I took all 3 linebackers. It was not a good class.
No, not a great class. We have Curtis Jacobs from Penn State, Cedric Gray from UNC, and third linebacker was Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State. It's
Want me to take it? I did the 3 and they're bad. I'll take it. So you don't.
Okay, I just got to give a shout out to Curtis Jacobs, former McDonald War Eagle. MIAA champions. Let's go.
Well, what's interesting about the class is that like when you want to talk about like sort of like athletic profile, it's the sliding scale, because I think on one side you have Cedric Gray, who's got that athletic profile, right? And then Jacobs is kind of in the middle, and then Eichenberg is not the athletic guy, right? Like you get toward the end. He's like a middle linebacker kind of thumper, but he's not going to have a lot of range, some different things. So again, not a great class, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these guys. I will say Cedric Gray was one of those players, though. I think we had him like in the 5th, and I had arguments between personnel guys definitely liked him. They're like, hey, he could be in the 3rd. One was like, hey, he could even sneak into the top of the second or the bottom of the second. I'm like, oh my God, we have him like the fifth, because I had other teams that were like, yeah, he, good athletic profile, but there were just a handful of limitations about him that they had problems with. So they were putting him much further down on their board. I would say out of this group, if there's one that I'm going to get slapped in the face on because of where we put him, it's going to end up being Gray. It's going to be
for sure. Yeah.
Like a second day pick. And we got him coming off the board on the fifth. Let's wait and see.
Let's wait and see.
Let's wait and see. Jacobs, I still feel okay on Jacobs. Like, it was the thing about Jacobs when you talk to evaluators, they're just like, he's a really solid linebacker. Like, he's solid. Whether it's you put him on the weak side, figure out exactly where to put him. But he's played all three linebacker positions, so there's versatility there. The biggest thing was he just got overshadowed a lot on that Penn State defense. There were people with better athletic profiles, popped more on tapes, had more consistent big playability, whatever. And so, maybe that tamped down a little bit of how people felt about him. But I think in those middle rounds, fourth area, Jacobs is probably safe in there. Maybe sneaks up. That was another one that we kind of had people argue about where exactly he could fall. And then Eichenberg, I feel pretty safe on him being kind of at the back end of the draft. He had a really productive 2022 season, ton of tackles, but he, to me, cuts that very familiar a mediocre athletic profile, can stack up some tackles, bring some emotion, some grit to the team, but you're like
lunch pail guy.
Lunch pail guy. Yeah, that thing. Which is, so you're like, okay, we're taking him in the seventh. I think that's where I took him, like 6th, 7th range, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
All right.
He's the only white linebacker on the all juice team. Yeah. we can say
that's
that
his distinction.
the only tidbit that I want to add for Curtis Jacobs that I saw when I was doing some research on him, he's kind of a little bit to the throwback days of linebackers. If you're just looking at like combine weight and height, he was the only projected off-ball linebacker, so not rushing the passer, that weighed over 240 pounds this year at the NFL Combine, and he also ran a 4.5. So, there's something to work with. At least he can run and hit.
He played all 4 years at Penn State, right? He was at Penn State 4 years, played all 4, played as a true freshman.
Former 5-star recruit.
And then, 4 or 5-star recruit. And then his last 3 years there, he was just a dude. Like, he plugged him in. He played really well. He was like he was there every single year. Like, if you watch Big Ten football, every time you saw Penn State, you're like, God, this feels like this guy's been here for 10 years, because he's just always making tackles, kind of always in the middle of things. And it'll be interesting to me. He could be one that maybe ends up coming out of those middle rounds where it turns out a pretty decent NFL career, where it's like not a lot was expected of him. He's a productive player. And he gets to the NFL and he continues to be a really productive player who lasts. So,
yeah, we're running a little short on time here. So we're going to get through these last picks in the secondary. And I think, there's not too much here because we did spend a few later round picks, although we might get burned on one of our cornerback picks. We have cornerbacks, Toledo cornerback Quinyon Mitchell, who's going to be a first round pick in a couple weeks. We have Florida State cornerback Jarian Jones. At safety, we have Wake Forest safety Malik Mustapha, who's one of my favorite players in the draft. And then Ohio State safety Josh Proctor, just to put a body there, kind of round it out at the end. Quinyon Mitchell, I think he's a stud. I can't really find anyone who has a negative opinion of him. To me, Quinyon, when you start with like these smaller school prospects, it's kind of about checking boxes in the offseason. So, you go to the Senior Bowl, you perform well, bang, you have the production. No one in this class has even gotten close to his on-ball production over the past 2 seasons combined. And then he goes to the combine, runs a 4.33, and then jumps out the gym. I don't know. You're kind of making a good case for yourself, right, for being a first-round pick.
Yeah, he was. Guys loved him. Like I brought up Jalen Petrie from a couple years ago, where I think he still holds the record for like consecutive calls where someone brought him up. Like it was like 12, 13 in a row, the Baylor safety, who's had pretty good NFL career, where, looks like he's fulfilled what a lot of the thought was on him. Mitchell's he wasn't quite to that level, but it felt like every single person that mentioned a defensive player, if they were like, hey, can you take a first round pick or a guy who's going to go high? I'm like, yeah. They're like, Mitchell. It's Mitchell all the way. Like, it's loved the way he competed, particularly the Senior Bowl, man. That guy, talk about like lighting it up during practice week and everybody walking out of there buzzing about a player. That absolutely happened with him. So love that we were able to add him at corner.
What's our Jerry Jones conundrum here?
Okay,
like how awful are we going to be?
Yeah, so Jerry Jones is another one that late. We put him late, and I think it was like 6th, 7th somewhere for Jerry Jones. Which I'm telling you, early on in the process, that's where I had people putting him. And then I wonder though if later. So he goes to the combine. He's 6 feet and 190 pounds. He runs a 4.38 40. And, so there's an element of an athletic profile there where you're like, okay, maybe, and it's corner, right? So you're like, maybe that's what boosted him. But it wasn't until we were way late in the process and I showed the team to a few different guys where he fell in that Cedric Gray box where people were like, what? Like, why do you have this guy so late in the draft? And I kind of panicked, but I'm like, no, we're going to stay locked into at least what the early boards were saying with some of the evaluators. I think it's just sort of like, high energy. Kid's got super high energy, competes his ass off. When you talk to people that really like him, obviously the speed is there, the physical profile is there. But then when you talk to people who don't like him, they're like, watch the tape where he makes a mistake. Like, he cannot clean up mistakes well. And we can't have a corner like that who can't clean up mistakes, because not only is he going to get burned, he puts himself in a situation where even the safeties get burned. And it, like, some guys are just like, he is a big play nightmare waiting to happen. So we really did not like him. Whereas others were like, no way, man, there's a lot to work with here and you can clean up some of that stuff. Yes, he has to get better on like he gets faked out, misses a move, like a double move or whatever it is, and then just really can't get himself back into the play. They think there are some teachable things with him that can definitely improve his game. But if he doesn't go late, it ain't my fault. It's the people who were ripping on him early that were pushing him down the board. So
yeah, and it only takes one coach. Once you start getting to the less value picks, to say, I can fix him. Got to circle back. Made a quick mistake. Brain's been fried. We have been working on this for the better part of a month, and we forgot to say that Michigan cornerback Mike Sanistril is on this team as the third cornerback. So we have 3 cornerbacks on this team, not 2. Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell, Florida State's Jerry Jones, and Michigan's Mike Sanistril. Sanistril, I got to him in the process after we had talked about the All Juice team, because when we were talking about him before and we put him on the list, I kind of only seen him tangentially when I was watching some of the Michigan defensive linemen. But when you go back and watch him, he's fun, man. Like, he makes a lot of plays on the ball. And I think a lot of people are drawn to this when they watch cornerbacks play. It's like the confidence that he plays with, the physicality that he plays with, because sometimes those guys aren't really known for being more physical. But I think when you look at the way that Jim Harbaugh in Michigan play football and play defense, the physicality is kind of demanded from you there. So that shows up a lot in his game. And I think, it's kind of like we were talking about Ladd McConkey turning a good wide receiver room into a great one. I kind of think Sanistril can have that same effect on, if he can walk into a cornerback room that has a guy or 2 already in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, a wide receiver at Michigan for a couple of years and then made the transition over to corner. So you would think there's still upside there on the table for him in terms of developing at the position. A lot of guys really loved him, loved the energy he brought. You get the cliche about him being that dog out on the field, but like a big emotional compass for them, a captain for a couple of years after he was the captain the year after he made so he makes the switch to corner. That year he makes the switch to corner. He's named a team captain. And 2 things that really stick out from talking to a host of people about him. One was he was thought of as being as responsible for that championship build as a Blake Corum, as a JJ McCarthy. Like, that's his standing inside the structure of that team in terms of like leadership. And then another one, someone told me, like, if you had talked to all these Michigan guys that are going to be coming out this year, if you had asked them, just pick another teammate, like who do you want to bring with you, that he would have been the pick. Like that, the highest percentage probably would have been Mike Sanderstill would have been the pick of other players in terms of who do you want to play, pick a teammate you want to go and play with on the NFL level. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And yeah, top end player. And I'm glad, we have like, I think for us, he'd probably be the nickel, our starting nickel right off the bat. So
yeah, those who would you play with on your team conversations are also always interesting to me to see where guys go with their answer, because to a degree, it's also asking someone, who would you trust to work for you for like millions of dollars? Like, who would you feel comfortable investing that into? And I think it speaks a lot of praise to someone when that's their answer. And for safety, I don't think there's too much to say about this. Just a quick synopsis. Malik Mustapha from Wake Forest, he'll run down and hit you in the mouth. Josh Proctor from Ohio State, he's more of a little rangy, over-the-top guy. But the reason we have Proctor so late is because he played 6 years at Ohio State. He's 24 years old, Come on. We
very limited.
Pretty limited. But at this point, we need a body there. And to be honest, I think when you just start looking at the talents that were available in like the top 100 range where we were picking players, it just didn't make sense to pick a safety over any of those players. So Penn State edge, Chop Robinson, Clemson edge, Xavier Thomas, Illinois defensive tackle, Johnny Newton, Oregon defensive tackle, Brandon Dorlus, Penn State linebacker Curtis Jacobs, UNC linebacker Cedric Gray. Did that again. Penn State linebacker Curtis Jacobs, UNC linebacker Cedric Gray, Ohio State linebacker Tommy Eichenberg, Toledo cornerback Quinyon Mitchell, Florida State cornerback Jarian Jones, Michigan cornerback Mike Sanderstill, and at safety we have Wake Forest Malik Mustapha and Ohio State's Josh Proctor. Anything you want to let off before we get to your interview with Ebony?
No, I think it was fun. I really appreciate you working on the team. Like I like you and I collaborating on this a lot, and I love the fact that we bring the two different aspects of you really doing a lot of tape work and me basically being lazy and telling everybody else, tell me why this guy's good or bad. So. This is one that I'm a little scared because of what happened late in the process where people are like, why is this guy here? Like, what's going on? We'll see how it ultimately unfolds. That's part of the fun though, honestly. And hopefully next year, I will put this in your put this in your lap now. I would like to go back, since this is the 10th team, right? The 10th all juice team. I would like to go back and, aside from doing the 2025 all juice team, I would like to do a piece where we do the top, basically let's take the best all juice picks from the first 10 years and build a team out of those as well.
I like that plan. It sounds like a good one.
You're gonna like it until January, February 2025, and then you're gonna go, why the hell did you give us? Yeah, you're like, why did you give us more work to do, man? Like, way to go!
I thought you liked us. Why are you giving us more work? So that's going to conclude it for the 2024 All Juice team talk. After a word from our sponsors, we're going to throw it to an interview that C-Rob had with Terez's fiance, Ebony Reed, where she has released her new book, 15 Cents on a Dollar: How Americans Made the Black-White Wealth Gap. And they're going to talk about Terez's lasting impact. And yeah, really appreciate you guys sitting through this. And we'll be right back after word from our sponsors.
All right. I'm here with Ebony Reed. Ebony, we know you on this show.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you. Yeah, it has been a while. Obviously, for the listeners, this is Ebony Reed. This was Terez Paylor's fiance, and she's been on the show before. Talk about her quite a bit. It feels like it's been a lifetime. I don't know, when was the last time we saw each other in person?
It was before 2022 when you were here in Kansas City. It's been a while. We've been busy.
Yeah, you've been busy. I don't know about me. You've definitely been busy. Yeah, Ebony has a book coming out that we're going to talk about, 15 Cents on the Dollar: How Americans Made the Black-White Wealth Gap. We're going to get to that. But we did want to talk to you, the All Juice team. This is the 10th. The 10th annual All Juice team is coming out, and Ebony
I'm wearing my shirt proudly.
I got my hoodie on, the very comfy hoodie that is fitting a little more snug than it used to, which is probably not a great thing.
You have on the original blue, and I have on the gold and black for Mizzou and you're wearing the Howard version. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we always tell people, remember, these are available at breakingt.com/Terez. And always remember that the proceeds from this go to support the Terez Paylor Scholarship at Howard University. And, check out the podcast description. It'll tell you also if you want to make a donation separate from buying the shirt. Ebony she spearheaded the effort to set up the scholarships.
Well, thank you. With a lot of help from a lot of friends. I just want to note too, Charles, that if people refresh their shirts, get a new shirt, or they have a first-time purchase, that the proceeds not only benefit the Howard Scholarship, but also the Power Mizzou Journalism Alumni Scholarship in memory of Terez Paylor.
Yeah, definitely. Please check that out. And thank you so much, Ebbs, over the years for all the work that you've done. It's been tremendous. It's awesome to see, now the scholarship starting to benefit students at Howard in particular. And it's just, it's a annual effort, an annual reminder that really keeps Terez's spirit with us all the time. And obviously the All Juice team as well. Ebony was there at the start of this. Now, I wasn't there for the beginning of this. I didn't know Terez when he launched the All Juice team. And as we continue to carry it on and put these teams together. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do it if we hadn't, had an ability to talk to you and know that you would be there to support us in that effort. But we've now had I've teamed up with a multitude of different people here at Yahoo over the years to do the last three, I want to say, the 2021, 2022, 2023, and now 2024. So 4. And every year that I sit down to do it, I'm like, man, like this thing is such a bear.
Are you like, this is a lot of work?
Yeah. I was like, how come Terez never complained about this? Like, I never heard him.
He complains.
He never complained to me. I'm like, I never had any idea how much work would go into this. And it is. It's just such a large amount of work and sifting and kind of hand wringing over, like, are we picking the right people? And,
but he loved it, and I know he'd be so proud that you guys are continuing it.
He did. He loved it, and we try to live up to. I look back at some of his past teams, and there are certain picks that he made where I'm just like, oh my God, like, how did he see this coming? And I'm curious, though. I'd never talked to you about sort of the genesis of it or what he was pouring into it from your perspective. I know now from the other side of it, but you were there. And I know how much time he devoted to this thing. So can you share with the audience, like, what he poured into this, like, every year to get this together?
I mean, he had spreadsheets after spreadsheets. I mean, that was one of the things, is he was tracking analytics and data on teams and players. And I mean, it was a whole year-long process. So when it was time to, like, put forth the picks for the teams, it was something that he had been just kind of working on throughout the whole year as he was doing his reporting for other articles. But he was incredibly proud of it. And, it was a passion project for him. So as it got closer and it was time to produce it, then it was, day and night, he was working on this project. He loved it.
Terez was literally doing the job of multiple people, because I approach it from the standpoint of, I reach out to people across the league and I say, give me some names, tell me who you're watching. Here's what the team is sort of about, who fits this mold. And that's how I gather a lot of the data. Whereas, like, Charles is breaking down a lot of film. He's watching cut-ups on a lot of players. He's evaluating them through his own eyes as an evaluator. Terez was doing both of those things. He was talking to people and evaluating them himself. I can never, I think, really fully explain, like, what a bear it is to kind of pull the team together and how much work he was really doing on it. It's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. And listen, he also had me in his ear at the same time saying, don't forget, it's your turn to do the dishes. The housework doesn't stop.
Yeah. I tell Dawn, I'm like, you just got to stay away from me for a while until I get this thing done. And it gets to the point where she's like, late last night, she's like, are you done with it? She's like, are you still working on it? Because she's going to bed. And I'm like, I got to stay up and work on this thing. I'm glad to have you on, because we're going to be able to talk about something else that you and I've known about for a really long time. I feel like I've kind of had I was like a fly on the wall for the book that is coming out. And this is something that I mean, you've been ruminating on for quite a while, right? This book. Now, again, it's first off, tell people the title of the book, and then if you can maybe share with people the hand that Terez also had in, this was something that I know when you put the proposal together that he was very interested in it.
He was, and he was very excited, and he read an early version on the proposal for 15 cents on the dollar, how Americans made the Black-White Wealth Gap. My co-author is journalist, academic Louise Story, who I worked with at the Wall Street Journal. And, we started working on this. Let me back up and say this. The summer of 2020 was, pivotal for many people and many communities that were having really deep conversations as America was going through a racial reckoning after George Floyd was killed. I mean, could see it in the coverage that you guys were doing at Yahoo Sports, in the articles that Terez was writing. Certainly conversations in our home were happening around, issues in society. But at that same time, I was having conversations with Louise as we were running our teams and doing our work at the Wall Street Journal. And we began to read books together, have conversations about things that we had experienced, seen in the workplace, seen in society. And, after, several months, we thought we actually haven't read a book about the history of the Black-White Wealth Gap that also encompasses stories and experiences of real people living today that most of them are under 50, although we do have some people who are interviewed, and one particular individual in the book who is, a person who is older. But this, to me, is a book that if you are someone and you just want to understand more about how we got to this place with wealth disparity in our country that impacts Black and brown communities. If you're someone that wants to understand history, if you're just someone that, wants to just read and understand what's happening with student loans, the criminal justice system, the bankruptcy system, finance, banking, it's all in this book through the lives and experiences of the 7 people that we chronicled over 2.5 years. It took Louise and I, we spent 2.5 years doing almost 400 interviews, to produce this work, because we'd have to spend hours with the people who are the focus, but also their families and then people who knew them. But then we also talked to experts in banking and history, in, many of the other areas that were covered through these people's lived experiences. So, Terez read an early, proposal, and he was just like, wow, like, you got to do this book. You got to do it with Louise. You guys are, have such complementary, skills. He was like, this will be, an amazing project. And I'm deeply grateful for Louise's partnership in this project. We have 3 goals for this book. 15 cents on the dollar, it is the Black-White Wealth Gap. So that data point comes from Federal Reserve data that is released every 3 years. And what it means is that the typical Black family has 15 cents in wealth when compared to the typical wealth of, $1 for every $1 that a typical white family holds. And there are many, inputs into that. There are systemic historical things have happened in our country that contribute to that. But then there are also structural issues today in society that impact the gap, as well. So we want people to understand the data and understand that data point. We also want to spur conversations across the country and get people, talking about, what it means to have 15 cents on the dollar, in wealth, and, bring this information to them. So you'll see Louise and I, we're out across the country this spring and summer, having community symposiums in different communities. We started right here in Kansas City because I couldn't imagine starting this effort, any other place. And so we had a few hundred people come out to the Negro Leagues baseball museums, Buck O'Neill Education and Research Center back in February. We'll be in Orlando, Florida soon, like tomorrow. We'll be in Austin. We'll be in New York. We'll be in Connecticut. We're moving around to share this information. And the third goal of our project, we hope, is to spur more empathy in society. We think if more people understand this wealth disparity and how it came to be and things that are impacting it even today, that we think that will impact conversations all over our country that range from affordable housing to the criminal justice system to entrepreneurship resources. And so we just want to get the information, out to people.
I think early on when we first talked about it and you told me you were going to try and tackle this, I thought to myself, I've never seen one thing that really ties together all these different aspects of how this develops over literally hundreds of years. And then I remember thinking to myself, how do you write that book? Is it just data? Is it just revisiting maybe historical turning points? But I think the window being the families is such a great, unique way to tell a story and also showcase. Well, I'm really proud of you. I know I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. I mean, if you don't know, Ebbs and Louise have significant journalistic chops. They are
Listen, Louise is the real deal. She's an investigative
You both are.
journalist.
Yeah, you both are. You're both heavy hitters. I'm very, very, very excited to see this. And I love the collaboration. I always like to work with a teammate on things. And, so I think that's a really unique aspect of this. So I can't wait. Please, if you're going to order it, pre-order it. If anybody is so inclined, definitely check out 15cents.info. That's 15cents.info. And I've already pre-ordered. So,
thank you, Charles.
Anybody else wants to pre-order, and people, the Yahoo's listening right now, please pre-order. I want to see this book really reach its full potential.
Thank you. And one other thing I'll mention is that when people open it in the beginning on the dedication page, they will see that my dedication goes to Terez, our relatives, past, present, and future.
That's awesome. I know that would have meant a lot to him. So thank you, Ebony, for being on. We really appreciate it. And by the way, I assume that the speaking events as you go around the country, are those on the website as well?
We do. So we encourage people, to come out and meet us and engage with us when we're in your communities. We've posted the ones on our site. So we'll be, like I said, we have a lot of places to visit. So it will be great. Yeah,
show out. Say hello. Yes. Say hello to Ebbs. Tell her that she's been a member of your podcasting experience. So that'll be awesome. Thank you again, Ebbs.
Thank you. Thanks, Charles. Bye, everybody.
That's going to do it for this episode of The Exempt List. We'll be back next Tuesday in the run-up to the 2024 NFL Draft. I'm your host, Charles McDonald. You can find me on Twitter @4Verge. Charles Robinson is on Twitter @Charles Robinson. Producer behind the glass, Stone Rochelle, is on Twitter @SJ Rochelle. And we will see you next week.